Hey guys, hope you're good. I am finally getting around to my Eating for Volume webinar. So let's get straight into it. So you might have heard me bang on about it before. What does it mean? It basically means maximum portion sizes for minimal calories. It's basically a method of eating that has you focusing on picking high volume. So as in like you get a lot of them. Low calorie foods. This essentially allows you to eat, larger quantities of food, like massive portions of food, whilst keeping calories quite low. So there's two reasons why you might want to do this. The first one is obviously if you have a weight loss goal and you want to make sure you're in a calorie deficit, obviously it's going to involve eating less food. So you are going to probably find that you are hungrier than normal. So the best way of kind of like ensuring you're not super hungry is by actually like increasing the size of your portions, but without that having like, a massive calorie tag attached to it. The second reason is basically why I do volume eating is because I have a massive appetite, and I love eating a metric fuck ton of food, but obviously like, being relatively short, I don't have the facility to eat, 3,000 calories a day and not gain weight. So if you are basically doing both of these things, i.e. trying to be in a calorie deficit and you have a large appetite, then like volume eating is an absolute essential. But essentially, the reason why a lot of you or a lot of my clients get very confused when they first start, the program, and because their first instinct in sort of losing weight is to actually eat less. So naturally we try and like eat smaller portions, and sometimes that is an appropriate thing to do. But we naturally just like reduce the portions of all of our food. But by focusing on like lower calorie, high volume foods, and like a lot of my clients will say in the first week, like, I actually can't eat all of this food. Like, how is it a calorie deficit? By focusing on that, it basically gives you bigger portions of food for less calories. So instead of eating less food, you're actually eating more food in terms of food volume, but fewer calories. So it basically means that you don't get hungry and you can stay in a calorie deficit. So why is it important? As I kind of mentioned, like hunger kills weight loss progress. Like the last thing you want when you're in a calorie deficit is to be hungry. Because you're going to struggle to stay in a calorie deficit. Obviously, if you're not in a calorie deficit, you're not going to make progress with your weight loss. So you want to be, when you're in a calorie deficit, the aim is to basically be as full as physically possible, without obviously being uncomfortable, for as much of the day as possible. And you will achieve that by obviously, eating high volume foods. So how do I do it? There's lots of different ways that you can maximize the volume of your meals. As like sort of like a couple of headings as to the easiest ways of doing that. Use reduced fat or fat-free options. So like, for instance, I love cheese. I like having like 50 grams of cheese on my meals. Obviously, if I had 50 grams of full fat cheese, like that's probably about 200 calories, whereas I use the reduced fat versions so I can have more of it essentially. So same with like yogurt. Like if you use like the fat-free version of yogurt, you can get like reduced fat butter. Obviously like it's usually like dairy items or sugars and syrups that you'll get like the low calorie options for. But yeah, essentially the reason that like reduced fat and fat-free stuff is good for volume eating is because fat is the most calorie dense macronutrient. And it's, as you'll see sort of in a couple of slides time, it's not very high volume. It's very low volume. Like, naturally, it's just all of them are very low volume. So getting reduced fat or fat-free stuff is going to drastically reduce the calories whilst, keeping the same sort of volume. The second way, and this is like, what you'll all sort of note, like all of my clients will notice, is that they have a massively increased veg intake. So you want to bulk out all of your meals. And I don't necessarily mean like, having like a big side portion of veg, because that's really boring. It could be as simple as like adding, peppers, spinach, peas, onions, and tomatoes to a curry. Like if I make like a jar curry, like a jar sauce curry on a Thursday for curry night, I'll always put onions, peppers, peas, spinach. What else will I put in there? Broccoli if I've got it. That kind of thing. I'll put that in there to kind of bulk out the portions a bit more. Don't drink your calories. This is a big one. So, we're all partial to, a mocha frappuccino, from Starbucks. That is 300 calories. And I was actually having a conversation with one of my clients on the phone earlier today, and she doesn't normally drink cocktails, but she had like a couple of Mai Tais, and when she tracked them, she realised they're like 250 calories each, compared to, a gin and tonic, which is, 50 calories each. So, drinking your calories either from alcohol or sugary sort of, hot chocolates, drinks, things with like whipped cream on, that kind of thing. Although I'm going to kind of contradict myself a little bit later on with that one. But, drinking your calories, essentially, don't drink your calories. And pick high volume snacks. There's also a couple of swaps that you can make when it comes to cooking methods and ingredients. So in terms of cooking methods, like raw veg is always going to be more voluminous than cooked veg. Obviously, if you look at like the size of, the portion size of spinach, like raw spinach compared to cooked spinach, you see how much the cooked spinach cooks down. Like, it's ridiculous. So obviously raw veg and probably not so much like raw carb sources, obviously, but like raw veg and raw fruit is going to be higher in volume than its cooked alternatives. And then ingredient selection, I'm going to come on to now. So whilst fruit itself is quite sort of high volume in terms of the size of it for the calories, there are some sort of fruits that are lower in volume, and some that are higher in volume. So, for instance, bananas, obviously they have a very high fructose density, which means they have more fructose is a naturally occurring sugar. So they are higher in sugar. It's not bad sugar. It's not an issue, but because it is more sugar dense, it has more carbs in it, which means it is going to be high calorie. Same with dried fruit. It is like just concentrated fructose. So dried fruit, obviously it shrinks when you dry it. And typically like the fruits that you get dried, like apricots, dates, figs, like that kind of thing, they're all quite, calorie dense. They're not like badly calorie dense, but they're more calorie dense than these other options here. Plums, grapes, nectarines, peaches, mangoes, and I know avocado, it is a fruit. It is technically a fat source. There are your lowest volume ones. So if you're looking to maximize your protein oats in the morning, berries, apples, you're probably not going to put oranges or tangerines on it, but berries and apples are going to be like your highest volume choices. That's why like my clients will be like, oh yes, that's why I always have berries on my fruit instead of banana, or that's why they say like, can I swap banana for berries? I say yeah, but you're not going to get much banana, so you can't do like a straight swap essentially. So you're going to get more bang for your buck with these berries, melon, oranges, tangerines, apples, grapefruit, that kind of thing. So I'm not saying avoid these, but I'm just saying if you are on low calories and you want to absolutely maximize the calories that you're on, these are your best bets for fruit. Okay, veggies. So, lowest volume veg, these are basically what I would sort of quantify as carbohydrate sources. So if you were tracking your food, these are the ones that you would track, these are the ones that you wouldn't track. So parsnips, anything starchy essentially. So parsnips, squash, pumpkin, obviously potatoes and beetroot. Again, they're higher in starch, which means they're more carb dense, which means if they've got a higher quantity of carbs, they're going to have more calories, whereas these are mostly water, and therefore water is no calorie. It has no calories in it. So that's why these are lower calorie. So it's just a concentration of carbohydrates, essentially. So, leafy greens, cucumber, courgette. Courgette is probably one of my favourite volume hacks, which I'll come on to. Basically all green veg, cauliflower, cabbage, mushrooms, stir-fry veg, like bean sprouts, peppers, onions, that kind of thing, all very low volume, very high volume, and same with carrots, which people always get surprised at. People always think that carrots, because they're sweet, are like really calorie dense, but they're not. Okay, carb sources. So, lowest volume. So you'll look at these, and especially with like the sort of first few that you've got here, like obviously bagels, pittas, tortillas, bread, like you normally only have like one or two of these because they're quite calorie dense. Whereas if you look at the quantity that you can have with these, obviously these you can have like a greater quantity. Like you may have, like if you weighed out 50 grams of oats and 50 grams of seeded bread, 50 grams of seeded bread is probably 2 slices, but 50 grams of oats is probably like 1,000 individual oats. That's always a good way of like remembering or working out what's actually a high volume food and what isn't. So your lowest volume food source is basically all of your breads, pastries, obviously any sugary cereal. So obviously like Cocoa Pops is going to be lower in volume compared to cornflakes because it's obviously got more sugar in it and therefore higher in carb, therefore like higher in calorie. Granola normally has nuts in and lots of sugar, obviously sugars and syrups, jam, dried fruit as I mentioned. Brown rice, brown pasta. I know everyone's like, oh, they're really healthy, but again, higher concentration of carbohydrates. The more carbohydrates, same with fats and protein, like it's going to be higher calorie. So, they are typically, whilst they are higher in fiber, they're not necessarily healthier. They're just higher in fiber by very minimal amounts, but they are higher in calorie. Obviously, like your full fat sodas, fruit juice, and alcohol. So these are your lowest volume carb sources. Highest volume, oats, the old trusty. Potatoes, white and red. Parsnips, I know these are like, you're like, well, you just said these are high volume, and yes, they are high volume for veg, as a veg source, but for a carb source, sorry, they're low volume for a vegetable, but they're high volume for a carb source. Rice, gluten-free pasta, really, really high in volume, like much higher than normal pasta, which is ideal. Popcorn, chickpeas, beans, lentils, rice cakes, rice noodles, vegetables and fruit, obviously, and quinoa. Protein sources. So these are basically, the reason these are low volume is because they're higher in fat. So they're basically protein and fat sources, whereas these are all pretty much just protein. And because you've obviously got the introduction of fat in there, and fat is the most calorie dense macronutrient at 9 calories per 1 gram, that is why these are typically lower volume. So lamb, obviously it's quite fatty. Salmon and oily fish like mackerel. Your high fat cuts of beef like a Wagyu steak, a sirloin or a ribeye, they're going to be higher fat than a rump because they've got more fat marbling and therefore they're going to be more calorie dense. Obviously your high fat percentage minces, pork like pork belly, pork shoulder, pork leg, they're all pretty high in fat. Full fat Greek yogurt, eggs, cheese, chicken wings, thighs, skin on chicken. So your highest volume protein sources: prawns, crab, other shellfish, like scallops, lobster, they're all really low calorie. Chicken breast, obviously lean mince, turkey and chicken breast. White fish, pretty much all very high volume. Cod, haddock, tilapia, that kind of thing. Tuna steak, tin tuna. Pork and beef medallion steaks, they have literally no fat on them. Rump steak, again, literally no fat. Egg whites, obviously the sort of like fat content comes with the egg yolk. Protein powder and obviously 0% fat Greek yogurt. So they're your high volume protein sources. Fat sources, so as I mentioned, like all fats are basically low volume because they're very calorie dense. The lowest volume is obviously oil. Like 5 grams of oil, 5 times 9, that's 45, so it's 45 calories, whereas like 5 grams of avocado is obviously going to look a lot bigger. These aren't necessarily high volume, these are just higher volume than oil. So if you need, like, for instance, like if you were bulking, a really easy way of getting calories in would just be by cooking with more oil. Obviously butter I would include in that as well. If you wanted a fat source that's actually going to contribute to the food volume within your stomach, then seeds, reduced fat coconut milk, nuts, nut butter, avocado, they're going to be sort of your lot. But this is not me saying like have loads of them. Obviously you still want to be mindful of fats because they are the most calorie dense, but obviously 50 grams of avocado is going to be less calories than 50 grams of oil. Okay, so my favourite hacks. So these are all sort of things that I've found from various, calorie deficits that I've been in, swapping like dietary preferences, that kind of thing. So for instance, using plant milk, not soy milk, because soy milk is actually quite high in fat, but almond, obviously coconut, not tinned, and oat milk. If you look in fact, you know what, I'll get my calories, my MyFitnessPal up and I'll show you. Okay, so I'm going to show you a couple of the sort of like calorific differences between all of the sort of hacks that I've got. So obviously you can see here, this is the difference between like almond milk and semi-skimmed milk, which is pretty like hefty. You can see that it's, well, I mean, the almond milk is like basically half the calories, like just under half the calories. So yeah, so that's that. Cream cheese was the other one. So you can get the reduced fat soft cheese. If we look at like 100 grams of that compared to 100 mils of double cream, vast. You can see such a big difference in calories. What else have we got? Courgettes can obviously double up as potatoes, so you can throw them in with mash, obviously cook them, you can turn them into chips, you can roast them, great in the air fryer as well. Popcorn and other sort of like airy snacks, so like anything that's like sort of popped, like pop chips, that kind of thing, are really good as a sort of like really filling snack. Like 20 grams of popcorn is actually a lot. Adding sofrito mix. So sofrito mix is a really good like cooking hack. I'll show you what it is. It's basically like a vegetable base mix. Sainsbury's do it, Ocado do it, Waitrose do it, Tesco do it as well. So Asda do it. So it's basically this. It's carrots, onion, and celery. Bear with me 1 second. Yeah, so you can add this to like minced dishes, like pasta dishes, like tomato pasta dishes, and it will really obviously get the veg in and bulk out your meal quite a lot as well. And then something you can do, so if you look at like your favourite snacks, like normally you can kind of break them down and see if you can make them high volume. So a really good example that I saw was yogurt coated raisins. Like if you had, instead of having yogurt coated raisins, if you had like a protein yogurt pot and uncoated raisins, in fact, this is probably a good one to show you the difference on MyFitnessPal. If you put like raisins in a protein yogurt, like the difference would be vast in terms of the calories. So I'll track that and I'll show you. This is one of my favorite ones that I've kind of like worked out recently. If you get like frozen fruit or even fresh fruit and put it in a saucepan with like a little bit of sweetener or a little bit of honey or something like that, or even just a bit of sugar, like a tiny bit of sugar, and then like basically heat it up until it kind of turns into like what is described as like a compote, and it looks like jam. You can make like a really nice low calorie jam that you could put on crumpets, toast, in porridge, that kind of thing. So that's quite a nice way of making a low calorie jam. Obviously, I would always say like pick berries over banana, and low calorie hot chocolate and squirty cream. Like this is one of my favourite snacks. I've literally just been drinking one, which is why I kept pausing this. Like I think I'm just looking at my MyFitnessPal. Like I had it yesterday evening as a snack, and it was basically, how much was it? 55. It was basically 80 calories, and it like really hit the spot with cravings, and also like it helped keep me full. Soup is another great one. Obviously, if you made a soup with all of those like high volume veggies, Not only are you getting your veg in, it's keeping you hydrated, and it's going to help keep you full. And as I said earlier, think about the quantities you get with one portion. Like if you obviously look at like one wrap doesn't really change. Like one wrap is one wrap, but if you get like 50 pieces of pasta, obviously that's going to be higher in volume. Plus, once you've cooked it, it's going to absorb water, so it's going to expand and get even bigger. So yes, that is basically how I would sort of approach volume eating. And I'll just show you like the difference with the calories on the sort of like yogurt coated raisins versus yogurt and raisins. So yes, here we go. I'm just loading it up so you can kind of see the difference, and I'll show you. Okay, well my phone has just chosen this moment to freeze and die. So yeah, but that is volume eating. I hope you have found it helpful. And yeah, enjoy.